This is FE Peer Review. The date is March the 30th, 2024. What was before the universe and the Kalam Cosmological Argument? Today I came across a new channel called T&P, which I quite enjoyed. The gentleman who made the channel is responding to a conversation between Alex O'Connor and William Lane Craig. I'll put a link to the channel in the description of the video and in a pinned comment. This discussion centers around the Kalam Cosmological Argument. I don't generally treat religious subjects on my channel, and my point here really isn't to address the religious aspect of this either, but rather just to address what I think is a fundamental flaw in the argument. I'm going to play you a bit of the video, and then I will read to you my comment that I left.
What does it mean to begin to exist? For example, when does a chair begin to exist? Is it when the plans are drawn up? When the wood is cut? When the pieces are assembled? The first time someone sits on it?
In the context of the Kalam Cosmological Argument, Paulogia points out an interesting fact about the first premise. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The exact same question was raised by Alex O'Connor in a discussion with William Lane Craig. Let's look into that one.
Whereas a chair doesn't begin to exist from nothing. A chair begins to exist from pre-existing material. And yes, although it makes sense to say the chair exists now and didn't exist an hour ago, what we really mean is that the material that the chair is made out of has rearranged itself or been rearranged in such a way that we now arbitrarily give it the label of a chair, but nothing has actually begun to exist.
Oh, Alex, I think that's just well, as you say, that's included in my list of arguments so bad I couldn't.
Indeed.
Just think of your own self. You began to exist. It is absurd to think that you existed before your father's sperm and mother's egg united in conception for you to begin to exist. You didn't exist during the Jurassic period. You didn't exist during the era of galaxy formation. You began to exist about 18 years ago in this conception event. I explicate what it means to begin to exist by saying X begins to exist at T if X exists at T, and T is the first time at which X exists.
Yep.
I started with just a general observation. We sort of see things, quote, begin to exist, but to declare that this is some kind of immutable law seems to be taking things too far without evidence. I'm no quantum physicist, but I understand that this proposition of things requiring a cause to, quote, come into existence is questionable. So that there gets right at the very root of the Kalam cosmological argument. Is there really a law that says everything that exists, that begins to exist, must have a cause? I'm not so sure that that's the case. At 058, Craig's somewhat derisive laughter, which thankfully he is trying to control, is unwarranted. He says, "That's included in my list of arguments, so bad I couldn't," and then it was unintelligible at that point. For a start, Alex was not stating an, quote, argument. It was formed as a statement, but he was really asking a question or for a clarification. He was asking a question, and it was a very reasonable one to ask. Given that all matter and energy has existed since the beginning of the universe, as far as we can tell, then it doesn't seem to make sense to talk of things, quote, beginning to exist. All that happens is that matter and energy change state and recombine. So to ask for a clarification from Craig on what he means by, quote, coming into existence is an entirely reasonable thing to do. Craig turns to the example of when does a specific consciousness first become conscious of its own self. That's a whole different can of worms. Does it happen at conception? Almost certainly not, though the thing that is going to become, quote, my body has begun to exist in that specific form. It would seem that consciousness and self-awareness, which are not the same thing, probably need for a certain amount of critical mass, to use the term loosely, in terms of brain activity, which needs to be taking place. I expect that at a certain point, fetuses do become conscious and later self-aware before birth. Or maybe self-awareness only happens immediately after birth when the fetus first experiences a change in its environment. I don't know. I doubt anyone does. Either way, it certainly indicates that, quote, coming into existence is not the simple and obvious thing Craig would like it to be. We're going to jump forward to 448, and I'll play you a snippet from the video.
It's irrelevant whether or not X is a fundamental thing that is not an arrangement of prior materials or whether it is.
I'm trying to move towards a distinction between the universe beginning to exist and things like chairs beginning to exist, and in order to show why perhaps they don't support each other. Let's say, you have a skyscraper and you don't know particularly what time it begins to exist, but you could say that it's a period of time instead. Still, it seems that the notion of beginning to exist, as we're talking about it as pertains to chairs and skyscrapers, is not an attribute of the thing, but an attribute of us. It's an attribute of the people observing it and giving it a label. The fact that a piece of wood becomes a chair is not something so much true of the wood, but as it is true of us, because nothing about the actual material really changes in such a way that's meaningful, except as we decide that it's meaningful.
Boy,
I like where Alex is going. In short, it's inappropriate to compare the beginning of a skyscraper or a human being with the beginning of the universe, and the Kalam is founded precisely on treating them as equivalents. The former is all about matter changing form. The latter is about all matter and energy actually coming into existence. They really are two very different things. My closing comments here. Now, I happen to believe the real flaw in Kalam is that people who argue for it are misstating current scientific understanding of what the Big Bang really is. For a start, though the Big Bang is still the origin hypothesis with the most evidence to support it, it is by no means considered an established fact, and physicists right now are engaged in deep research and debate on other possibilities. Second, even the classic Big Bang idea does not posit that, quote, everything came from nothing in the sense that we lay people use the word nothing. It's difficult to put into words because we can't talk about before space-time. That is fundamentally nonsense in that, quote, before requires a continuity of time. But bearing that in mind, whatever might have been the condition before our universe came into existence in its present form, all that exists was already in existence in some other kind of form about which we really know practically nothing. I should say, probably. Here's where I'd like to end. I suspect there may be an actual limit to human knowledge, a limit imposed by the finite nature of the universe we inhabit. It may be that we simply cannot gain access to the data we need. Maybe by chance, some smart cosmologist might stumble on the right answer, but it may be impossible to confirm it to a greater degree of certainty than other possible answers, again because of a lack of access to data from nature indicating its before state. But for the Kalam cosmological argument to try to exploit this gap in our knowledge brings the argument back into the, quote, God of the gaps territory. If it's possible for us to learn of the origin of the universe, if indeed there was an origin, it will be through scientific insight. Please make sure to check out TNP's video. You'll find a link in the description and in a pinned comment. And thank you for your patience listening to me today. Have a great day. This is FE Peer Review.